Aurelion Sol, the scaling mid lane mage, now in the jungle. It's a bizarre pick as this champion has very little CC, but this is AlienBallien, a master EU West player who climbed there with Aurelion jungle. This is a very unique jungler that's all about farming Stardust stacks from your camps, using the jungle to safely become a strong carry. This pick is not an OP jungler, in fact it has a plan to specifically give up the first 2 dragons and 2 Rift Heralds, just to buy him time to wait for the big fight when his champion is ready, using this role to scale from a tiny little Magikarp into a terrifying Gyarados, throwing huge ultimate waves in fights and burning enemies at huge range. And shockingly, this player plays with Ghost Smite, so even on this risky pick he has no flash. I interviewed him to get all of the tips and tiny details that turn this from a ban-worthy pick into something that works in high elo. But first, with the big mid-season ranked update coming, that makes it much easier for gold and silver players to hit platinum, as well as Riot announcing a whole new emerald rank above platinum, this season is the perfect time for anyone to get a new highest rank. And I have the perfect thing to help you do it. This is POWERSPIKE, a League of Legends companion app that's also the sponsor of this video. If you're trying to rank up, POWERSPIKE is your best friend, showing detailed stats including your weaknesses you need to improve on your profile. In-game, POWERSPIKE has a live stat tracker so you can see which areas you need to improve there. Also having summoner spell timers on the UI. Click to start and it will automatically tell you when the enemy summoner will be back up. And if like me you love playing ARAM, POWERSPIKE now also has ARAM stats so you can see your best ARAM picks. And in Champ Select it shows you the champion win rates of each available champion, making sure you don't accidentally pick a terrible one. Over 9.5 million players are already using POWERSPIKE, so to catch up with them, download it completely for free from the link in the description and start ranking up today. Back to Aurelion Sol and our player AlienBallien, also known as David, a player from Milan, Italy. He started playing League in Season 6, just before Aurelion Sol came out, coming from the dark side, Dota 2. As he hit level 20, Riot released a trailer for the galaxy-sized Star Destroyer, Aurelion Sol. Knowing it immediately, he would main this champion and learn every little detail about it no matter how small. Then he reached level 30 and started his rank placements. He only played Aurelion Sol, and as we all know, old Aurelion was incredibly unique and also very hard to play, so he lost 8 games in a row, only winning 2 of them. His friends teased him about this score, and looking back on it, our player is thankful that they did. It really created a grit of determination inside him to try hard and outrank them. By the end of this year, he hit gold, matching their rank. In Season 7, after losing 6 promo series in a row and winning the 7th one, he reached diamond, hitting his goal and outranking all of his friends. With his ego beginning to match Aurelion Sol's, he was not done. The next couple of seasons he kept going, becoming a well-known Aurelion Sol player in high elo. This all changed in Season 13 with the Aurelion Sol rework. As the gameplay footage came out, our player was quite worried for his favourite champion. Just in case he didn't like it, he spent months trying other picks, dropping his account to low diamond. In February, the rework was released, and luckily, he loved it. Then one day, he was streaming the new Asol playing mid, and someone suggested, hey, if you like this champion, why not give Asol jungle a try, just to see if you enjoy it? Our player laughed, looking at the win rate being below 40%. It seemed like a terrible idea, but he thought he'd try it anyway. And from that moment, his love for the champion and the game itself returned, adoring this pick and all of the new tricks to learn in this new role. This is not a story of an OP pick, it's the story of a player rediscovering his passion and spending months practicing to make it work. Not only regaining his love, but also regaining his elo, reaching 189 LP EUS Master with Aurelion Jungle. So why would you play jungle instead of just playing mid lane? Well, since the rework, our player says that in mid lane in high elo, the champion is really easy to punish due to how weak his early game is. Most matchups you'll fall behind in stacks, fall behind in gold, and by the time you start to get strong, the game will be over. But in the jungle, it's much different. Your goal is still to play for mid game, where Aurelion Sol gets strong, and he wants to collide with the enemy jungler as little as possible, even giving up the first 2 dragons and probably the first 2 Rift Heralds as well. But in exchange for this, he's using his very strong AoE damage to farm stacks off camps, and these passive stacks give him a ton of stats, which turn him into the mid and late game monster we all know, and he makes this clear in Champ Select every time, linking his account to show this pick works, and telling his team, I'm not trolling, keep a stable mental, don't tilt, let me get 2 items and I will 1v9 the game. If nobody dodges, he gets into game and starts his special path. Pathing is vital on this pick since you have no hard CC, low damage, and won't win any 1v1s in the first few levels. It's super dangerous, and that's why he has a unique jungle path which involves early bases. Every game he paths towards bot lane as he thinks it's it's super important. He wards his opposite buff at level 1 for safety. On this side he starts blue, doing Gromp and then wolves. On the other side he starts red, doing golems into raptors. Each camp heals you after it dies, and also the jungle pet heals you constantly, so Aurelion can just stand still and use his Q for DPS. But he does get quite low, so after just 3 camps he bases immediately, having 350 gold. This champion isn't a healthy clearer, so to reduce the risk and to increase his power, he bases and uses this exact gold amount to buy Dark Seal, also regenning to full health so that any assassin jungler won't be able to invade and catch him out. Returning to bot side, he clears the rest of his camps, constantly watching for any danger. As I mentioned, this pick is all about stacking. Aurelion Stardust is very similar to Nasus or Senna getting stacks. The more you have, the stronger your champion gets, stacking infinitely and making your champion very overpowered in late game. So in the jungle, your goal is to use your E to collect Stardust from the camps. The only way to do this is to use your E near the end of killing the camp, using your Q and the execute damage to get the stack. Usually in lane you can also get stacks with your Q, but that only works on champions. So for jungle it's all about killing enemies inside this circle. You get stacks from every minion in the jungle, including the small ones. The large monsters give 3 dust each and the small ones give 1 each. So it's optimal to focus on getting the stack from the big one, but he does have a trick to get all of the raptors, walking into the camp, taking aggro, and only queuing the big raptor. Then after some time he uses E to finish all of them off at the same time, giving him 8 stacks from just 1 camp. They don't have to die from your E, as long as they die inside the black hole you'll get the stacks. But he doesn't worry too much about stacking in early game, as Aurelion Sol's clear gets really fast with just 1 item. The early game is mostly about survival and getting this item, so then you can start power farming to get stacks and become strong. And here is where his ghost starts to come in. I asked him, why ghost over flash? It seems super risky to not have the escape. However, he believes that overall, ghost is actually the stronger summoner spell, with a much lower cooldown, almost a third less than flash. And at the same time, if you use it well, it can provide much higher reward than flash as well. First off, against invades, the ghost gives him enough speed to run away, whereas if he uses flash, the enemy will just match it with their own, wasting a summoner and still probably dying. And overall, at this point in League, he believes flash as a spell is quite predictable. People use it in similar ways every game to engage or escape. However, ghost is much different on every champion, giving bonus movement speed that works differently depending on how you combo it with your abilities. So for example, Aurelion Sol's W, the flight, comboed with ghost, it's perfect as the speed of the flight is increased by the summoner. So if you're chasing an enemy with your Q, the ghost will start to gap close and make sure you can catch up to them. Or if you're flying away and kiting, the ghost helps him make space between him and the enemy, keeping him safe. And really, flash wouldn't combo with Aurelion's kit at all, so it wouldn't make a lot of sense for this pick. Early game, this pick completely avoids fighting, as his damage won't be enough to kill anyone, and for CC he only really has a slow. But after his first clear and buying some amp tomes, he can actually gank. How do these ganks work? Well, he simply stays near a lane until a fight begins, then uses W from Fog of War to enter, going over walls if needed. You can really gank from all angles on this champion, inventing a new one every time he ganks. When he gets close, he places E on top of the enemy to slow them, then uses Q along with his teammates' damage to finish off the kill. Sol can do about 50% of an enemy's health bar in a fight, so ganking when your laner is behind is quite a bad idea. To help a little, our player takes first strike every game. Of course, this champion loves any free gold it can get since it scales so well, but it's also really easy to proc, as you can fly from Fog of War into the gank, practically guaranteeing you can proc it with your Q, giving him much better upfront damage and actually able to assassinate people later on. At level 6 he gets ult, which helps a lot with ganks. He can ghost into a lane and then use ult behind the enemy to predict their escape path, using E to try and trap them inside where it's going to land, taking his ultimate hunter to start stacking it early. This lets him take more fights, and more fights means more hitting enemies, which gives him more stacks from his Q. He has a stat goal for every game, and says that even in bad games where he dies a few times, it's still really likely you can get enough stacks to stay relevant, unlike in mid lane where if you die a couple of times you're going to get stomped. In jungle he wants 100 stacks every 10 minutes, which is very doable if you clear well, so by 20 minutes and 200 stacks, his Q will be dealing an extra 6.2% max HP damage per tick, his W gains an extra 25% range, his E will execute anyone at 5.2% health, the same as having a free collector passive, and his ultimate size is increased by 40%, and this is all on top of his item damage as well, so you can see how ridiculous this pick can be even in average games, due to how safely and quickly this role can get stacks. 200 stacks is roughly the same as full clearing jungle 7 times in 20 minutes. It only takes about 1 minute to do when you have an item, so you can probably gank, make plays, and protect teammates for about 10 minutes, and just farm for the rest of it. You never really have to AFK AFK farm as your damage grows so quickly. In the jungle, our player has an interesting skill order, the kind of thing you'd only learn from a one trick. Unsurprisingly, he maxes Q first for the practically infinite duration, giving him the most damage as fast as possible, but second, strangely, he maxes W, the flying. This is a rare thing to do on Sol, something only about 5% of Aurelion Sol players do, with most of them maxing E instead. But the reason for it makes a lot of sense. One thing that people often don't notice, or maybe don't care enough about, is this small part of Aurelion's W text. While flying with W, his Q damage is increased by 20%, and the cooldown is decreased as well. Comparing this to maxing E, that only increases your damage by a tiny bit, while also increasing the mana cost. So although E is very important for this jungle playstyle, the reward of maxing it second is not as valuable as maxing W. You may also have noticed he takes the green jungle item. Sol has enough damage from skills and enough speed already thanks to the ghost, so this just provides a little more safety throughout clearing in mid-game to make sure he's able to stay alive and keep stacking. Buying Enquiries as his mythic just for the damage, then buying probably his best item, Realize. The slow is incredible on your Q, and to combo with the slow on your E, keeping enemies constantly slowed to enable your damage and make yourself safer. At 20 minutes you really notice a big change in this guy's game. Sure, his focus stays the same, you're still a stacking champion so you gotta keep farming, but the champion really comes online and deals a lot of damage all of a sudden. He isn't a pushover anymore. Enemies have to be scared of him carrying the fight. If he's alive, they can still lose. For every fight, he'd love to have his empowered ultimate, the Skies Descend. This requires 75 Stardust to be collected, but it's most important for the third dragon fight, as this is where he can really start to contest the game and turn it around. His goal is to fight around objectives where he can land a huge AoE ult on multiple enemies, and get a big slow, using ult into E to trap enemies in the zone where the ult's going to hit, but it's even better if you can combo it with your team's CC. The ideal way for him to fight is DPSing with Q while flying past to get the extra damage buff, getting one takedown to get the flight reset, and then pick a new direction to chase someone else. He's mostly concerned about his positioning over everything else, and won't start DPSing until enemies have put themselves in a bad position, such as jumping on his teammate, giving Aurelion an easy window to dump all of his damage. This 200 stack mark is where Aurelion Sol power spikes, and outdamages most other champions, as well as melting objectives with his Q. A very underrated strategy is simply pressing Q on a Baron and killing it. It doesn't look like it should work, and people don't expect it to, so that's why it's so effective. He can duo Baron at 20 minutes with 2 items in about 12 seconds, getting it before enemies can even react. And since his DPS is so stable, it's really easy to smite it as well. Late game Aurelion Sol is true to his lore. He destroys everything in his reach. Get Skies Descend, press it in a team fight, and cover most of the enemy's screen, slowing everyone with Realize and the Shockwave, and then cleaning them up with your Q. It is super hard for enemy backline champions to outplay this, and meanwhile you're just having a great time throwing out stars and breathing fire. It's great. According to our player, the most important part about this pick is that if early game goes terribly, no matter how bad it gets, Sol is not out of the game. You can always get stacks from camps, clear waves with your E to stop enemies from pushing, and use these stacks to gain loads of damage to get back into the game. This pick is very unique, and so is the champion, with our player often just standing still and hoping his damage is enough to get a kill. But overall, this is a fun role for the champion, allowing you to avoid the terrible mid lane matchups. This pick is not OP or easy, but mid and late game Sol is one of the true remaining scaling mages that can 1v9 games. So if you can get past the struggles, you will probably win that game. If you're a new Aurelion player and try this against a good jungler, there's a good chance you go 0-10 and get banned. This pick needs some time put into it. For his full build, you don't actually need that many items. The early Dark Seal for bonus AP and potentially snowballing, into your mythic, magic pen boots, Realize for the slow and safety, buying Rabadons for your big damage peak, or Zhonya's if you need it against assassins. Ideally winning by this point, or adding more AP if the game goes on. Normally our player bans the best jungler. Right now a champion like Kha'Zix or Rek'Sai are great options. Here's his full rune page as well, first strike and of course free boots, a free 300 gold and extra stats is great, and cosmic insight to make sure his ghost is up more often. For more Aurelion jungle, AlienBallien has a Twitch, linked in the description, and thanks to him for all of this great information. And thanks again to Professor for sponsoring this video. Whether you're playing ranked, normals or ARAM, make sure you join the other 9.5 million other users and download it right away for the time-saving and game-winning features. Link in the description. Thanks so much for watching.